Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Chief Meteorologist Jesse Gunkel with the very latest advisory. Came out at 10 o'clock this evening, and we do have some adjustments out there at this point. Obviously, the biggest takeaway, we are on the verge of seeing a tropical depression. Most likely that will happen by early tomorrow morning. We're seeing more and more in the way of organization with this system. Notice again, we're starting to see some circulation a little bit here out in the central Gulf. Notice the overall track continues to move in a southwestern direction. What that means for us? Well, there is a nice little window here that we could be seeing some quick intensification over the next couple days. Obviously, as we make our way through Thursday, going into Friday before landfall, possibly early on Saturday at this point. So again, with that possible path, we get into some environmental conditions that become a little bit more conducive. Also, we get some upper level support, and I think that is the big takeaway here. Once that happens, this system is going to quickly bloom out there. You see right now the winds are sustained at 30 miles per hour. We've got winds out of the southwest at about 9 miles per hour. We are still starting to see some of those rain bands, still the potential that we could see some showers overnight, some pockets where we could easily see an inch of rainfall. A lot of these bands are going to start to redevelop as we head into the morning hours of tomorrow. Obviously today is the first day, and we've got a lot of rain ahead of us in the days to come, and I'll show you those estimates in just a few. So here you go. Take a look at the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. I just want to show you they kind of drove through where that center of circulation was this afternoon and early evening. They did find some winds up to about 28 miles per hour. That's below tropical depression strength winds. However, over the last few hours, we're seeing that organization, and as you see it on the satellite picture, things are starting to look a little bit better out there. So as you see here, they're most likely going to call this a tropical depression by early tomorrow morning. Around 7 a.m., those winds could get up to about 35 miles per hour. By the time we make our way into the evening hours, we're looking at a tropical storm out there in the Gulf, in the northern Gulf, and then quickly strengthening into a Category 1 storm before landfall. I want to also point out that the cone has shrunk a little bit at this point. You see the path moving inland as a Category 1 storm and then driving through the state. That is a good thing for us. It's not going to stall out. I think that's very important to point out because we don't want it sitting, we don't want it spinning and dumping a bunch of rainfall, kind of getting stuck or stalling across the area. That's where you get into the situations like Harvey and Florence. Well, this is going to move through. However, Baton Rouge sits right here, and you notice big picture, we're not too far away from the center. And also, obviously, the northeastern quadrant, that is the worst part of the storm to be in because that's where you get your strongest winds and your heaviest rainfall. A lot of this is also going to extend back out into the Gulf of Mexico for a couple days. And obviously, if it takes that track, well, we could see some hurricane force winds here in Baton Rouge sometime maybe late Friday going in early on Saturday. So as you notice here, that central point, it's starting to solidify a little bit. All track models are starting to lead right up through the Atchafalaya Basin at this point. That spread is starting to come together, meaning uncertainty. It's starting to drop a little bit at this point. You can even see it here on all types of models. Our European model, obviously that is a global model. That's a bigger picture. You see that we've got a lot of heavy, intense rainfall. We'll see what happens after midnight when the new run comes out. Does it shift further back to the west or towards the east? But everything seems pretty consistent. It's starting to make more of a trek back to the east at this point, and then it drives through the area. And what I also want to point out is watch what happens. By the time we get to late Sunday, going into early on Monday, you see a lot of those outer bands still extend back into the Gulf of Mexico. So even if this system pushes out of our area, we're still going to have to deal with some rainfall late Sunday going into Monday before we possibly get back into a drier environment. That'll happen maybe early on Tuesday, possibility of even some sunshine at that point. But showing you the American model. This is another global model. This one goes for a weaker version, a little bit more broad, but notice what happens. Same type of path up the Atchafalaya River. And notice where all of that heavy rainfall sits, once again across southeastern Louisiana, then it continues to drive through. Still some pretty heavy rain bands extending back out into the Gulf of Mexico late Sunday going into early Monday. So rain is really going to be a factor for us. I think that's our biggest threat. We still have the possibility that we could see some strong winds out there, hurricane force winds, maybe again some strong tropical storm force winds. It all really kind of depends on what happens just before landfall. But the concern is we get a lot of rainfall ahead of this storm. The ground is very saturated. Obviously, a lot of our trees around here, they don't have that deep taproot. A lot of those roots go kind of out from the center. What happens is you get that ball. Well, again, you don't have that sturdy structure anymore. The ground is kind of wobbly at this point. And then you get some strong wind gusts on top of it. Those trees topple, and we take down power lines across the capital area. Very similar to what we saw with the Gustav situation. Now, as you notice here, also, I do want to point out again, models, other ones, our in-house model, the NAM model, all kind of starting to agree with what the European model is kind of showing at this point, that it's going to start to make more of a northwestern turn and possibly right into central Louisiana along the coastline, somewhere towards Acadiana, making its way up towards Lafayette, and obviously we still fall on the eastern side of the storm, so the heaviest rainfall and those strongest winds. Now, because of that potential rain threat ahead of us, obviously we sit underneath that flash flood watch now through Sunday, but most likely they may even extend that into Monday at this point. It all depends on how much rainfall we will see over the next couple days. And obviously this is the latest estimate. You can see here that a lot of areas are in 6 to 12 inch range, and locally we could see some higher amounts. With every wave of rain that we get, or every band, it's easy for us to see the potential from anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of rainfall. And if we get stuck under one of those feeder bands as that system lifts out of here, well, that rain could quickly add up across the region. We sit underneath a hurricane watch just because at landfall we're looking at a Category 1. That's from Cameron Parish all the way to the mouth of the Mississippi. That's the dark pink, light pink. We're talking tropical storm watch. So that includes areas all the way to Mississippi at this point. You see here the likelihood for us to see some hurricane force winds sometime Saturday, well, pretty high at this point. We're sitting somewhere in that 70 to 80 category. As you notice, storm surge. The concern is that we're going to start to see those winds over the next couple of days continue to push that water further inland. And as you see here, it's mainly for the areas from Mississippi all the way to Cameron Parish. The concern here is that we could see our water levels quickly jump to about 3 feet above what we're currently seeing. Further inland, not expected to be as much, but as you know, again, those water levels could quickly climb if we start to see that rapid intensification over the next 24 hours. And wave totals not expected to be much right now, but I expect those waves to kind of pick up a little bit, maybe into that 3 to 6 foot category. Right now, no watches or warnings out there. It was a very active day, especially in New Orleans today. Flash flooding across much of the region from Canal Street to Magazine Street. Saw people in some kayaks. We also had some water spots out there. Now for us, again, we had some heavy rainfall a little bit further inland. We are getting a break at this hour, which is good. So big story here and overall impacts. I'm going to give you kind of the timeline, and this just evolves around the current track, okay? This could change a little bit. Obviously, it will adjust if intensity changes or if the track shifts a little bit east or west at this point. But for the time being, inland flooding will be our biggest threat here. And that starts out obviously today and it goes through Sunday, now maybe even extending into Monday at this point. 6 to 12 inches of rainfall, and locally we could see some higher amounts. Obviously the European model going extreme, 25 inches of rainfall. Maybe not that far, but I still think we could be seeing a lot of rain in some localized areas. So be on the lookout for that, because obviously rainfall rates will be very intense at times. Wednesday through Sunday, the chance for a few isolated thunderstorms with tornadoes. We could see some spin-ups out there, even some water spouts, just like we saw today. It's a very deep and tropical environment. Again, obviously those clouds are pretty stacked, and it's easy for us to spawn those tornadoes, especially with those feeder bands out there. Friday going into Saturday, that's when we're going to most likely start to see tropical storm and maybe even hurricane force winds at this point. Friday going into Saturday, we have to be concerned about coastal flooding. Obviously, it looks like we're going to be seeing those levels at about 3 feet above the ground at this point. So if you live around Lake Maurepas or Lake Pontchartrain, one of those lakes, or just along the coastline, expect those water levels to quickly rise. And obviously we're going to have to adjust the storm surge forecast at this point, because again, that could change as we make our way into the next day, day and a half at this point. So next 7-day forecast, I do want to show you here that we've got scattered showers and thunderstorms and the likelihood for rain ahead of us. We're keeping a very close eye on soon to be Barry. Looks like a depression in the morning, and then it looks like we're going to be seeing a tropical storm by the afternoon. So they'll finally name it at this point. Temperatures will sit a little bit cooler over the next couple days because of rain, but I just want to point out here that rain will be an issue probably until about midweek tomorrow. And just prepare, don't panic. have that game plan, put it into action, make sure you're following reliable sources out there. That is the big key out there. And just kind of get everything in place ahead of time. Take care of those pets, have an emergency plan, gather some water, make sure your documents are ready to go, and charge those batteries, especially on that cell phone. You can always take that with you just to keep an up-to-date forecast as to really what's happening into the area. So we're going to have more updates, obviously, once the new advisory comes in after midnight and heading into the morning hours. We're going to continue to keep you up to the very latest. We've got more newscasts on the way with more and more information, obviously, and also our social media pages. So make sure you follow those. Thank you and have a good evening.